Hello all and welcome to Critical Faculty. I'm your host, Hani Salim. The month of July, I've decided to focus on Christianity, portraying different topics and different subjects within the Jewish Bible as well as the Christian one. And to start this series, I've got a wonderful, and not just a wonderful a scholar of biology and the art of religion, but somebody who's shares something very close to my heart, which is love for animals. Hello, Aron. How are you?
How do you do, man?
Very good.
Before we went live, my wife and I work for a rescue group for dog rescue, and so we take in stray dogs when we can, and we find them owners when we can. And you were telling me you do something vaguely similar.
Yeah. My wife and I regularly volunteer in a no-kill shelter. There's a shelter in Melbourne, Victoria, where they take all the animals are about to be put down because of lack of adoptions, and they give them a home for life. It doesn't matter. We're talking donkeys, cats, dogs, you name it. And we go and clean on weekends, clean the animals and play with them and give them a bit of a human touch. And they get adopted to the right people. And the owner, who's an atheist, a Swedish lady, who's sort of devoted her life for that sort of purpose. And she would flea, worm all the animals. They're ready for adoption at a small fee. I think it's only 120 Aussie dollars, which is about 80 American dollars. You get yourself a beautiful friend for life. And they come in all different shapes and forms. She would actually interview the potential adopters. She would want to. It's not for profit. So she would actually make sure she will have a series of questions for the potential adopters, making sure that they're actually ready to have the responsibility of an animal. So yeah, it's a passion in our life, and it's a wonderful thing. We've just talked about how unreliable human beings could be, and I find solace sometimes in the company of animals. Actually, most of the time as I'm getting older.
Yeah, I was frustrated that we arrange a meeting from some people that have a country estate, and when we meet them, they see how well behaved the dog is. So they talk about how beautiful he is, and then they see how well he gets along with their dog, and then they say, well, can we call you later this week? Just think about it first. Like, really? We drove down. You could just leave with the dog, and now you want to think about whether you want to leave an abandoned dog still abandoned. That's what is there to think about? I'm sorry. Two other people have promised me that, hey, if you don't have a home for this dog within a week, I'll adopt this dog. Two other people, and I'm tired of people telling me. Lying to me. I'm sick of people lying to me. If you're not going to take the dog, don't tell me you're going to take the dog. Because I'm going to think that people are up to their word like I am. Yeah.
Yeah, I never understood why would such thing happen. It's yeah. I think you're muted, Aron. Just try to speak again. Just making sure your audio is working.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah,
all right,
for a second. Yeah, it is very disappointing. But who's this handsome chap next to you? Temptress.
This is Durango. He's a bull snake. Pituophis catenifer sei. Not to be confused with Pituophis catenifer affini, which is the gopher snake. And while some of my snakes are absolute wonderful people and are genuinely sweet and affectionate and everything, him not so much. He's physically beautiful, but he's a bit of a poopy head.
So they do. I mean, probably we're going to talk a little bit about biology since we're talking about animals, because he's a reptile, got a reptile brain, a hind brain, supposed to be the most of the basic part of the brain. But do you find
for him that kind of makes sense? I do have a couple of snakes that will surprise you with how smart and how affectionate they can be.
Wow, that's what I was going to say.
Unfortunately, that's not him.
Wow. Okay. So, do you think that even though with the hind brain, which is a very basic instinctual top part of the brain, is attachment, being attached to humans and being fed and stuff, has a little bit altered their personality? There's a bit of reciprocation of some sort.
Well, some of them I've raised from hatchling, and he's one of them.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more involved in the genetics. They talk about the conflict between nature or the balance between nature and nurture. And with him, it was all genetic. So he came out of the bag hissing at me. Wow. I asked the breeder, I said, I want somebody that's going to grow big because it's a bull snake. I want a large bull snake that is also sociable that I can carry around. And so the way you would estimate that is by their parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I got was somebody that stopped growing before their growth rate never really stops, but it slows down significantly. His growth rate slowed down before he ever made 5 feet. I was hoping for 8. So not only did I get an undersized snake, but I got one with a shitty attitude. Beautiful. He is beautiful, but it's clearly not what I wanted.
You can't have it all about Aron. We at some point we had 7 cats and 4 dogs, and they do have distinct personalities, and you would wonder where would this come from. It's quite interesting, but I don't want to say sold because we don't believe in that bullshit. But it is quite interesting that unique personality of each of these beautiful animals, but absolutely gorgeous.
I wish this guy could understand. You would think, after living with me for nigh on 3 years, almost exactly 3 years, this guy's been with me.
Wow.
And he still hisses at me every time I pick him up. I don't get that.
Maybe it's just an instinctual thing until he realizes, oh, it's Aron.
Well, no, it is genetic, because I've got a couple of retics, which have the reputation of pit bulls. So you can have if you have a pit bull, your experience with your pit bull might be that it's a completely lovely animal, but they have a reputation. Yeah. Pit bulls do statistically kill more people than any other breed of dog. Retics are kind of that way. However, the ones that I have are fucking wonderful. I love them, and they seem very comfortable with me. My biggest one, who's 11 feet long now, he knows he's safe with me. He will snuggle with me. He comes to me for assurance, and I love that. He's an absolute sweetheart. Never showed anybody any aggression at all.
Well, that is wonderful. Okay, well, let's kickstart the topic for today. I'm trying to explore the Christian belief. This is where you really can't talk about Christianity without the attachment to one of the weirdest gods ever invented by humans, Yahweh. He's such a black and white dude. You know exactly where you stand with Yahweh. But when you talk about the Christian God, which is Jesus, you would think, God, that's such an ambiguous God. That's even his followers didn't even understand what the hell he's on about most of the time. So, can you give us a brief comparison of the two characters, Yahweh and Jesus? From reading the gospel, how do you find them? How do you think? How do you get to think, okay, well, this is the same person, or are they? Maybe they're not.
Well, no, they're not remotely the same. And let's be very clear. Jesus never claimed to be God. There's the assertion that believers often make, that Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am, and therefore that means, well, that's a secret coded message, meaning that except that Jesus was speaking Aramaic, and when you translate that into Greek, well, then you get this other meaning that in the original language didn't exist. So that wasn't implied. Jesus always, only, ever said that God was someone else, somewhere else, who could do things Jesus couldn't do and who knew things Jesus didn't know. And that's important. Because if Jesus is God made flesh, as the wanna pretenders try to make him out to be, then he would know the same things that God knows, right? But that's not the case. And then Jesus wouldn't have to pray to anybody else, pleading for this or that. Jesus would say, take this cup away from me, not because I will it, but because you will it. Is that Jesus talking to himself? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Who are you talking to? You gave your apostles the ability to forgive sins. Why are you asking somebody else to do that for you?
Some Christians trying to explain this away by providing this weird analogy: perfect God, perfect human. And when Jesus sort of reincarnated in the body of Jesus, that human walk in the earth has become the perfect human. So therefore, he gets detached temporarily to talk to that entity which is God, and he's just a mere human. Because if he wasn't a mere human, perfect human, that is, then the torture on the cross would mean nothing. What do you think of this analogy?
I think the torture on the cross, an awful lot of that story was retrofitted after the fact. So Christians imagine that there was an awful lot that was prophesied, known in advance, but there's a whole lot of prophecies that are written in the Bible after the shit already happened. And if you talk to biblical historians, people who have scholarly degrees in Bible studies, they can point to this, that, or the other story that, no, this was written after it happened. It was written as a prophecy, but we already knew what happened before it happened. And then there's a whole lot of other prophecies that are actually in the Bible and remain in the Bible, even though they utterly failed. Ezekiel is a good example. He failed spectacularly. And in one of his prophecies, he even admitted that his previous prophecy was a failure.
Yeah.
So Ezekiel predicted that Nebuchadnezzar would come along and he would take over the city of Tyre. And he would take over the island city, and that he would tear down their gates and everything, and then leave it just a barren piece of rock, and nobody would ever recognize it. Later in the Bible, there are people still talking about the Tyrians, who, after Nebuchadnezzar is dead and gone, the Tyrians are still there. So, I mean, their city still exists. It was eventually conquered by a different king a century later, and then the prophecy was that they were never going to they would never have power again. They had power again almost immediately. That didn't last forever, because nothing does, but they did rise again. They never became this barren rock that no one would identify. It says that no one would even be able to find it anymore. Google Maps, bitch, we can find it right now. So then Ezekiel comes in and says that that Nebuchadnezzar, same guy, would take over Egypt, the whole of Egypt, and he would lay such waste to it that neither man nor beast would step foot in Egypt for 40 years. You know when that happened? It didn't. That never happened.
Did. Yeah, never did.
Yeah, Nebuchadnezzar died. That shit never happened. So, but you can't get believers who have a desperate emotional attachment to believe this shit. They will never admit that their prophecies failed. They will write prophecies in that aren't even prophecies. In one translation, and just one, there's a thing in, I think it's 2 Kings, where they talk about how a guy's being hunted by people using hunting dogs. Mm-hmm. And the dogs bite at his hands and feet because he's being chased by people with hunting dogs. And however, in one translation, it says that they pierce his hands and feet. Every other translation say that they're biting at him. But in one translation, it says pierce his hand and feet. And so Christians will say, see, that's a prophecy about Jesus, but only in that one translation and only in that one portion of a sentence. How the fuck is that a prophecy? What a prophecy is when somebody says, this specific thing will happen by this time, and that's how you know it'll happen. But what happens with Christian prophecies is the shit is written after it was going to happen, and it's still so vague that you can't identify for certain whether it happened or not, or whether it was ever going to, because it's all written so badly.
Prophecy, by definition, it reminds me of modern day fortune tellers. They throw at you as many prophecies as they can, and then one sticks, and you know what happens. It's like the one dream that we remember because it's very close to us waking up. Dream on average about 7 to 8 dreams a night, but we remember the one that's very close to us waking up, and it's very similar. So the one that sticks, they say, oh well, prophecy works, but it's completely different than the predictions made by science. Like the general relativity proved by Einstein by saying, here there is going to be a star, and that star's light is going to bend around the sun because of the gravity pull. So that's scientific prediction, but prophecy has always been bullshit.
What I love is talking to people who think that they have the power of prophecy, because there are some Christians who pretend that. And so we back in the days of blog TV, we ended up with this one Christian on. So, okay, well, give us a prophecy then for what's going to happen in current times. And at that moment, when we had this conversation, there was a massive oil spill from a British oil company in the Gulf of Mexico. Why there's a British oil company drilling in Gulf of Mexico, I don't know. But anyway, the prophecy was from this guy that we had on our show at that time. He said they would use nuclear weapons to stop the oil leak. So that's God talking to you. That's God telling you that they're going to detonate a nuclear bomb to close an oil leak in a pipeline. The guy was so fucking stupid that he had no idea how ridiculous everything he said sounded.
He's so ridiculous.
You might be surprised to learn his prophecy did not come true.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll shift it and say, hey, well, that's another prophecy. There is an update 2.01. It reminds me of the Mormon faith, where versions of God's ultimate message has been delivered by the angel Maronai, to give permission to the black people to go to church or stop polygamy when it's convenient.
Isn't it funny how God occasionally changes his mind? The timeless, unchanging God who changes his mind. and suddenly allows Gentiles into the church, or suddenly allows black people into the church, or suddenly allows women to preach.
Homosexuals, now there are homosexual priests. I think it's a popularity thing, isn't it? Right? Like, God would like the likes and the shares and the comments, and therefore he would go with the what's in vogue, what's in fashion, and if the it's what to sort of to reserve and achieve the maximum number of believers, regardless. He's actually literally a pragmatic God.
The more believers, the more tithe.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Like and subscribe.
There's Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett. Do you read any of Terry Pratchett's work?
I haven't read any of it. No, I have seen some of the movies that he made, like this.
You got to read a book called Small Gods, and it talks about gods who would fade away and become smaller because the number of followers will diminish, and they will grow and get bigger because of the number of followers.
That sounds like Neil Gaiman's American Gods.
Oh yeah,
I loved that TV show. That was actually my favorite TV show for a while. Unfortunately,
canceled it. We were gutted. I loved Odin. I mean, the character of Odin was wonderful.
Odin was not somebody I ever expected. I mean, somebody that would brag about being a liar and a cheat. But he ends up being the villain.
Yeah,
he's the unexpected villain. The guy you're working for this whole time is the bad guy, and you don't realize it until now.
Yeah,
and then spoiler, because it doesn't matter anymore because they canceled the show. But Shadow Moon, the guy who was working for Odin, without knowing it was Odin for the longest time, did not know that he himself, a black man, was Balder.
Yeah. Well, he was the son of Odin. He's a demigod. He's his son. Yeah.
That was a wild show. Anybody that if you're looking for anything to watch that's interesting, it takes about 3 episodes to get into it, but by that third one you're like, yeah, this is pretty good. And I remember some of the last episode, there was this one, there's like a gay or pansexual orgy in this one place where we watched this like really incredibly wild sex scene for a show, what's effectively a TV show. And my wife said, that's the gayest thing I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, that's the jinn, the guy, the Arabic dude. It had to be an Arab for sure. And that's why a lot of Arabs are like, we're not homosexuals, we're all heterosexuals.
For procreation, men for pleasure. That's what I heard when I was in the UAE.
Yeah. It's a very funny one. And the scenes with the goddess, the ones who's like used to devour men into her vagina.
oh, I can't remember her name, but what a fabulous character that was.
I think she probably is kind of, that's nature when you think about it. That's Mother Nature, which reminds me of another wonderful movie. I don't know if you've seen this with Jennifer Lawrence called Mother.
Oh no, I haven't seen that one.
Oh, this is a story. That's another wonderful. That's about God and nature, and and it's got Jesus in it, and it's a wonderful analogy, but it's very metaphorical. Not a lot of people don't get it. It's got Adam and Eve, it's got Noah, it's got every single prophet, but as human characters within the movie.
Okay. So what was the other question? Did we answer the first question adequately?
Well, when we talked about Odin and his son, and the difference in the characters, Odin was such a liar, and he was actually honest about him being a deceiver, and his son was a little bit different because you remember Shadow Moon was like a man of honesty and integrity.
And Shadow Moon had no idea that he was his son.
Yeah.
They canceled the show before Shadow learned that.
Yeah, true. But we kind of knew because, in the third season, there was a lot of hints and we knew that this was going to happen. That's why I was waiting for the fourth season, because Shadow Moon, once he realizes who he is, he could have actually started doing crazy shit,
One of the things I loved about that show was that Shadow Moon spoke like you would expect an American black man to speak, right? But then when you see the interviews with the actor who plays
English, is English, yeah.
completely British, you would never expect that at all.
Yeah. Like the guy from the Good Doctor, Freddie. It's a wonderful, all these actors with broad American accent, and when they speak for real, they're like English or Welsh or Irish, and it's really funny.
I'm embarrassed as an American that I honestly thought Shadow Moon was legit American.
Yeah. Well, they have to perfect the accent, but the analogy of the son and the So when we take the analogy to Yahweh and his son, it's very similar. Yahweh is a very strong, stern God, means business, and Jesus is a God that walks the earth, and he's a lot more understanding. But then he didn't come to change the laws. He came there to sort of to perfect it and complete them, or not deny them. So how does that work?
I remember Jesus seems to be, he's like doing a fan fiction of the original Jewish doctrine. He would like randomly change shit. It's like, yeah, you're supposed to follow this lesser commandment of washing your hands. And creationists would bring this up to me, say, well, how did people know to wash their hands if God didn't tell them? Like, well, why is it that Jesus is telling people not to wash their hands?
Yeah.
Because he said it didn't matter what you put into your mouth that corrupts you. It's matter what comes out of your mouth, meaning that he believed in magic words.
Very, very true. Yeah. Imagine the amount of people would have been saved through history just because, the germ theory wasn't evolved.
Let me put it another way. I wrote this. I wrote this in my first book. I just want to read this to you. That God says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." Then Jesus says, "No one comes to the Father but through me. I am the Lord, and beside me there is no Savior. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God. I am Jehovah, and there is none else. Besides me, there is no God. I will gird thee, though thou hast not known me, that thou may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is none besides me. I am Jehovah, and there is none else. You've said so, but I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven." You see how you have these? Yeah, you have the Jewish God and you have the Christian God contradicting each other, but believers never notice that.
Or they'll find a way. Always, they'll find a way, and it happens in the Quran. And I remember you had series about the Quran, and the sausage is made exactly the same. Just instead of using pork, they're using veal in the Islamic tradition.
Yeah, I think it's funny that somebody accused me just days ago, earlier this week. Somebody says, "How come you never criticize Islam, coward?"
I get the same thing. So the one of the reasons I am having these series, because I'm very active on TikTok at the moment covering the Islamic faith, and I get the same accusation. So and I feel guilty because now I'm actually interested in the story of God. I think a lot of people mistaken atheists for we're not interested in the story, because to me it's fascinating how the human mind, the evolution of the human brain and morality, and how we learn from stories and legends and stuff like that. It's quite interesting to me. I know it's all false, but we learned. Somebody said that sometimes the story is truer than the truth, because the power of story, it's a very powerful thing. What do you reckon?
Well, the story, there's I was taking Russian language for a while, and one of the things that they taught in Russian language is that you had to not just know what the words mean, but you had to understand the cultural expectations. So people expect you to have this long drawn out set of formalities that Americans don't have. We get straight to business, but the Russians want to have a long period of sharing stories and that kind of thing. So with the religious background, you have very much that same thing. You can't just say how things are. You have to be illustrative. You have to, and everything has to be metaphorical somehow. And so you have to tell this long, drawn out, ridiculous story that kind of implies the meaning or the motive that you want to convey without being explicit or direct about it, which is one of the reasons that so many people believe the Bible in a way that it was not intended to be read. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes complete sense. I mean, that's language is contextual. You got lots of consideration, cultural context, and the word context is used quite a lot in debates, because you'd be accused most of the time, oh, you're taking this out of context. If I have a penny every time this is said, and you explain that you understand the concept, and you talk about the whole narrative, but they still accuse you of you're using this outside of context. So, for example, Elohi, Elohi, lama sabachthani.
It doesn't matter how you read it in context. You can show that it's in context. They're still going to use that argument. Any verse that contradicts what they just said, even if the rest of the chapter contradicts it too, they'll still say it's out of context.
Jesus on the cross, praying to his own God and questioning God in some sort of a plea. Why have you forsaken me? Is how can this be used as a metaphor for what?
How could it imagine people who say that Jesus is God incarnate? How could Jesus utter those words?
It makes no sense.
Jesus is God.
And it's a very funny one. It's not in any gospel. This is in the Gospel of John, the high Christology gospel that has a different language than the all other synoptic gospels. It's the one that pretty much comes so close to show Jesus to be God. Yet it's the one that talks about him fleeing to God. So it's very strange.
Excuse me, I'm confused. Was John in Greek and the other three in Aramaic? They were all in Greek, weren't they?
Correct, all in Greek, Koine Greek, yeah.
Okay, because you said that John was the only one in a different language.
No, not different language. Different languages and rhetoric, high Christology. So it's not like a historical account. It's more of a divine account. It's got more spirituality in it than the other God. Yeah. So I'm confused, because that gospel is the one where he says, if you see me, you've seen God, you've seen the Father. It's the closest one to Jesus declaring that he is God.
And then Jesus says these other things that completely contradict that. No one has seen me, or no one has seen the Father but me, or how was it put? My favorite version is when Jesus says, he says at one point, supposedly, I and the Father are one. Mm-hmm. But then later, Jesus asks the Father, because Jesus is not God. Jesus has to ask God. And he says, can my disciples be one with me, the same as I am one with you? And then they also, if they're one with me, also be one with you? This is Jesus asking God. If Jesus asked a question like that, does that not prove that Jesus is not God and also is not one with God in the same way that Christians imagine?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's in the fucking scriptures. It's the same book the believers have been reading. Do they not read for comprehension?
And Bart Ehrman, I told you about the Bart Ehrman article. Bart Ehrman is
heard of him.
Yeah, he's I'm a big fan. He is convinced they are not the same person at all. They are not the same person. They're completely different entities, if you wish, and that will explain everything away. But then we are in a big trouble, because Christianity is supposed to be a monotheistic religion. how can a monotheistic religion, well, even Judaism, the start of Judaism, Elohim, and how El was, a Canaanite god, and the evolution of Yahweh himself, because we've got statues of the damn thing, and temples, and he had a wife and all that crazy stuff. But it seems monotheism is trying to push itself through a lot of aftermath of a polytheistic foundation.
Well, what happened was that somebody pointed out that, what I just read, the exact translation of what I just read, where in Isaiah 45, God says, there is no other God. There is nobody sitting to my right hand. Jesus is claiming to be the God at his right hand. God says in the very first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. But Jesus says that no one comes to the Father but through me. So Jesus is positioning himself as a God, not the God, not the same character as God, but he's claiming to be unified with God, at least in purpose, and potentially with some kind of, I don't know, magical authority embodied in him. But Jesus is still the God before God. Thou shalt put no other gods before me. You put Jesus before me. So the only way that Christians could reconcile that was to make up the concept of the Trinity, which was, they borrowed that concept from the Hindu Trimurti. But in the Hindu Trimurti, Brahma, Shiva, and Rama remain separate individuals, each with their own lives and their own wives. Whereas in the Trinity, somehow Jesus is his own Father and the Holy Ghost, and they're all the same person, but they're three separate ones. And if that confuses you, it's because you're stupid and we got this right.
How can you be the same person and you're going to sit on the right-hand side of yourself?
I mean, so Jesus gets baptized. And this is the first time that you hear God speaking about Jesus in the same room as Jesus. This is kind of like when Clark Kent meets Superman. Yeah. So God says, this is my son, Jesus, in whom I am very proud. Now, that's God speaking, not Jesus. And then the Holy Ghost, who is also there, leads Jesus off to someplace Jesus didn't know. So we're talking about three separate minds that know different things. Jesus is not God. Jesus is not Jehovah, Yahweh, Adonai, Allah, Abba, El. Jesus is none of those characters. Jesus is not God.
This is fascinating. So do you think the Hellenistic environment where Christianity sort of grew has an effect on that sort of the Greek mythology of the god and the demigods and the sons and half man, half human, half god, half human?
Absolutely. You've got Apollonius of Tyana, right, who was a contemporary of Jesus, known well through Rome, credited with the same shit that Jesus was doing, living at the same time that Jesus allegedly lived, but his story, his fame rather, he was famous before Jesus, even though most numbers put him as slightly after Jesus, so that Jesus was already alive when he was born and so on, although he lived longer than Jesus did, kind of. Mm-hmm. So, but Apollonius of Tyana healed the sick and performed all these miracles, and then eventually got persecuted by the Romans for performing magic. And then prior to that, you have Caesar Augustus, who was given godlike powers posthumously. All these great stories talking about what a great supernatural hero he was. Kind of the same thing as what you get from North Korea about Kim Jong-un.
Yeah,
very similar kind of propaganda. And so with this going on in Rome, and then you've got the other Greek gods and heroes. I mean, Dionysus, who identified as the vine, and who died and rose again. He lived again. So there's Dionysus II, which is the They called him Dionysus too because it's the same guy who was killed and then grew again. And then he also produced water from wine in a much more impressive way than Jesus did, because when Dionysus did it, he caused the fountains of the earth to spring forth wine. Whereas all Jesus did was the Penn and Teller trick of you pour water into a jug and you pour wine out. That's all Jesus did. Dionysus had the fountains of the earth doing that shit. And he did that at least 400 years, if not 500 years before Jesus. So is Jesus a sequel to an already popular human idea? Or, as I like to put it, I think that either Dionysus really could turn water into wine just like Jesus eventually did, or, and this is infinitely more likely, Jesus couldn't do it either.
And it's a recycled story. It's a nice story, been recycled through different cultures, neighboring cultures, within the same region.
And just as Alcestis, Greek heroine, was taken to Hades for 3 days, Hercules goes down and rescues her.
Resurrection.
Jesus goes to hell for 3 days, and it's the same place as Hades, because Sheol and Hades have a lot of similarities, but there are some important differences too. And so you get this creation of hell out of the difference between Hades and Sheol.
Yeah, well, the cultural adaptation of the same thing. This is a fascinating story. What I don't understand in the 21st century, obviously you can see Christianity has evolved a lot. It's the traditional Christianity from the Nicene creeds and all the different, arguments at the very beginning, whether Jesus was co-eternal with God, because remember, there was a huge debate and a lot of blood was shed on, by the fact was Jesus created? Is he a smaller in rank? But then he was declared co-equal, co-eternal.
Great story that is, I've been told that this is almost certainly just legend, that this didn't actually happen. But when there was at the Nicene Convention, there was this big dispute between Arius and Athanasius as to whether Jesus was a created being or whether he was purely God, which creates a bunch of contradictions. And then one of them argued that Jesus was a son of God, he was a prophet of God, but he was not God. He was not the same essence as Adonai, Jehovah, Allah, El, Abba, Yahweh. And then Saint Nicholas, who would later become famous as
Santa Claus,
reputedly punched Athanasius in the face for having said that. So, Merry Christmas. Here's a knuckle sandwich.
Enjoy your shiner.
Yeah. I get confused as to whether it was Arius or Athanasius. I think that Arius was the one that was arguing.
Yeah. It was the Arius for sure. The Arius was the huge debates. And lots of them were killed because he's claiming that Jesus was with a lower rank, and which actually kind of logical.
The people, the clique that held to the idea that Jesus was a created being, that he was a prophet of God, but that he wasn't necessarily God, nor even the Son of God. Those people were, as I understand it from a course on the comparison of historical mythology, they were banished to the city of Medina, where Islam arose 200 years later.
Interesting.
So Islam holds the same belief that Jesus was a prophet of God, but not the Son of God, and that Jesus did not rise from the dead, that Jesus was never crucified. In fact, he never died.
Which explains the Quranic understanding
Jesus
of
living for centuries, coming out of his house every day to go heal the sick. I guess he worked in an emergency ward. I'm not sure, but anyway, He would go out and heal the sick every day until there was sometime 400 or 500 years later when he was eventually admitted into heaven for whatever reason. I guess they just got tired of making up bullshit about him.
Isn't it interesting that every religion almost is a heresy of the one previous? So Christianity is the Jewish heretics, and Islam seems to be the Christian heretics.
Indeed. And then, so as you mentioned, Christianity was based in Judaism and is a heresy of Judaism. But Judaism also is based on another prior religion.
Yeah.
You know what that one is?
So that would be the Canaanites God, yeah.
No. There's a common association because there's a lot of substance to it for the Mesopotamian mythos. But the what I have read is that scholars say that there was more influence from Zoroastrianism than from any other source. So you might think that all of Judaism was based or rooted somehow in Mesopotamian mythos, and a lot of their myths do directly come from that, but more of their theology comes from Zoroastrianism than anything else. And the funny thing is that Jesus, or the Christian concept of hell as a form of damnation for good and evil people, that is not shared with Judaism. Judaism doesn't have that belief. Christians reached past Judaism to extract that straight from Zoroastrianism. I think it is the Hadnak Nasht, one of the Avestas of Zarathustra. He says that the righteous man will, upon his death, ascend to the kingdom of justice and truth under the wise Lord Ahura Mazda. Whereas the evil man will, upon his death, descend into the kingdom of the lie ruled by Ahriman the opposer. And the translation of Ahriman the opposer, the enemy, is Ha-Shatan, which is the first concept of Satan.
So, and that explains away the evolution of Lucifer, because Lucifer in Judaism, the accuser or the adversary, is the right hand of God, his bodyguard. The book of Job would clearly tell you that Jesus and God and Satan were a tag team.
Yeah, it's a funny thing that Christians have this concept of God and Satan as being mortal enemies when Satan was one of God's employees. It was not that Jesus and God were like twins separated at birth. It's not a Loki Thor kind of thing, but Christians make it out to be that. Satan is older than Jesus. Satan is older than Judaism. He comes from Zoroastrianism. But the notion that the serpent in the garden was secretly Satan, complete bullshit.
Yeah, in Judaism, it's not Lucifer at all. It's not Morning Star. It's just an evil animal, or
there's a Talmudic legend, which means that it doesn't have. It's just what people believed. It's not actually, it's not endorsed necessarily by Scripture, but the rabbis will acknowledge that this was a common belief at one time, that the serpent character was Lilith, who was Adam's first wife.
Before Eve, yeah.
Yep, who came back in the form of a naga, so she's a woman's body with the top half of a woman and the bottom half of a snake. And indeed, if you look up a lot of Renaissance paintings, and even I got to visit the Notre Dame Cathedral before it burned down.
Before it burned, yeah.
Yeah, and right as you go in the door, the main entrance.
Yeah, I remember seeing it.
There's all these saints carved into the wall, and all of the saints have pedestals, and each of the pedestals themselves depict a scene. And right as you're walking in through the front door, the pedestal for that saint over the front door as you walk in depicts Lilith in the temptation of Eve. You have a very obviously female character, nude female character with the body of a snake.
Yeah.
And she is, she's gesturing to Adam on one side and Eve on the other.
So kind of a Christian Medusa.
And you see that same kind of depiction where Lilith is, or the serpent is either, it's clearly female over and over again in like all these different depictions from the Renaissance. I don't know about Michelangelo, but I think most of the rest of the Ninja Turtles did these kind of depictions where she's either a lizard or a serpent with boobs, that kind of thing.
Oh, I've got a question from one of the viewers here, and he's very curious. Were you born into a religious family?
Michelangelo was one of the ones that depicted Lilith as a serpent. I'm sorry. At the top of the Sistine Chapel, you do get to see Lilith as a serpent.
Sistine Chapel. Okay. Yeah. Were you born into a religious family?
I was born into a family that called themselves religious. My mother is very religious, but she's more gullible. I don't respect the theology of anybody in my family. We had people in my family that refused to crack open a Bible. They don't care what it says. They don't know what a creed is. They don't know what it means to be Christian. They say they're Christian, but they don't know what that means. They won't read the Bible. They just believe in the man upstairs. So whatever they want to say God says is what God says, not whatever the Bible says, because they're not going to read the Bible.
It's actually most religious people nowadays are like that. Even Muslims. It's funny how they don't just go on about their lives as normal, and when it comes to the right context, they invoke God as if I'm all out of ideas.
My mother kept telling me all through my childhood that I should read the Book of Mormon, and when I finally told her that I would, and for the reason that I would, because I've already read the Bible and torn it to pieces, and that's the foundation for the Book of Mormon. If the Book of Mormon is based on this manure that the Bible is, how could the Book of Mormon possibly hold up? Yeah, let me dive into reading that. And then she suddenly didn't want me to read the Book of Mormon anymore. She just wanted me to believe the book without reading it, which is what Christians do. Oh, I've never read the Bible, but I believe it.
Funny enough, the Book of Mormon and the Mormon faith believe in the Trinity in such a different way. They actually believe. I think Joseph Smith met all three characters of the Trinity separately.
Well, I know he met Jesus and God at the same time.
Yeah, but so obviously they can't be one and the same,
Yep.
Unless we're talking about the holographic universe where somebody's projecting add some weird quantum mechanics into it. This is incredible. We're heading into the last sort of 10 minutes of the conversation, and I just want to grab. So if this is an introduction of a myth that is sort of evolving over time to suit current affairs and the evolution of humans and the cultural consideration of the time, where do you think Christianity is going to look like in the next 50, 100 years? Is it going to continue to evolve?
Is it going to continue to exist? I have a hard time believing it will continue to exist. In 1,500 years? Christianity should have collapsed already by then. In the last 1,500 years, look how dramatically it changed. Jesus taught that you should all be renunciate. You should surrender all of your wealth. You give away or sell everything you own to raise money to feed the poor, and specifically the immigrants, and more specifically their children.
Yeah.
What do modern Christians here in the United States teach? Fuck the poor, deport the immigrant, and remove the children's birthright citizenship.
And these are the most devout in the South, right?
Yeah, they're all good Christians. It's just that they're completely opposite of Jesus in every way, on every point. How could a religion like that continue to exist when they already violate everything Jesus taught? How could there be another 1,500 years of this bullshit unless they rewrite the Bible?
Well, do you think there's, I mean, racism is a funny thing, and it's got some evolutionary background, the xenophobia, that we're too afraid of those who don't look, it helped us survive at some point. But the world now is a village, the whole, we are the custodian of this pale blue dot in the middle of no freaking where, and we are in it together.
It's hard for me to imagine how your tribe, your handful of people that you live with and around, you're okay with each other as long as there are Neanderthals, because you can look at a Neanderthal and see that they're different. Or you can look at Homo erectus and see that they're different. You can look at Homo habilis and see that they're different. And so because they're different, you have to kill them all. And then when all of them are gone, well, now you look at each other and realize you look different too. Mm-hmm. I have to kill you as well. And so that's the foundation of modern theism, isn't it? Excessive racism, hatred against your fellow man.
But don't you think that it's the whole thing is endorsed by God? This particular biological inherited view that has sort of taken an ugly turn. God, I mean, the idea of my chosen people. On what criteria did God choose these people? I mean, have they won the lottery or something?
Well, they were the ones that made up God.
It's the other way around. They've adopted him, right?
Exactly. Why is it that God told all of these specific stories only to this one provincial group in this one tiny circle on the map? And whatever prophets appeared anywhere else all told radically different stories with no common ground whatsoever. Zarathustra, Lao Tsung, Confucius, Buddha, Krishna. Everybody tells a absolutely unrelated story entirely. But they're all they can't all be from the same God, can they? Krishna said he was the source of all the gods, that he was the supreme personality of the Godhead, the Hindu Trimurti, and that he was the creator of the multiverse. And this was credited to him centuries before Jesus. Yet, if you talk to Christians, they will tell you that Christianity is the oldest religion ever. Older than Judaism. Christians know fuck all, do they?
Well, we have the same analogy in Islam, that they reckon every single prophet has appeared on earth is actually a Muslim, preparing Islam. And when you think about it, if God created, or God had Jesus with the name tag and a job description of the Savior, saving from what? I mean, Adam and Eve had to eat from the tree, otherwise God's prophecy would have not been fulfilled. It's been orchestrated all along. We've been set up.
So Joseph Smith, Guru Nanak, Baha'u'llah, these people came after Islam began. But what about Zarathustra and Apollo and Prometheus and Dionysus and Aron Ra? They all came before. They became before Judaism. Mm-hmm. They're older religions than the religion on which Christianity is based. And that's not even talking about the Mesopotamian beliefs, which we know they had a huge contribution to these as well. Because Judaism is a mix of Zoroastrianism and the Mesopotamian mythos. But you don't hear any reference to any of those Mesopotamian gods. If you go to China, you get a completely different creation story. There are some curious parallels. There was a great flood in China where a warrior got really upset at having lost a battle and climbed up to a tall mountain and plunged his spear into the firmament, the dome that covers the earth from the waters above the firmament, which were also detailed in the Bible. Why don't Christians recognize when the Bible says ridiculous shit like that there's water above the firmament and when there is no firmament? But anyway, this guy chucked his spear through the firmament and created this huge hole into which all this water ran and flooded the earth. And then the Naga goddess, remember we were talking about Nagas earlier? You know, the body of a woman, or the top half of a woman and the bottom half is a snake. The Naga goddess Nukwa had to come in and clean up the mess, stop the leak, clean up the flood, and then she had to create, and I'm not sure if this was as a result of the flood or if she did prior to the flood, she had to create clay figurines to create the first man and woman. Gosh, that sounds like a whole bunch of other myths that eventually ended up in the Bible, doesn't it?
Very uncanny. I mean, actually, in the Egyptian mythology as well is the same. The gods were creating humans from clay. This is a recycled story by the looks of things. And one of the, and probably we'll end with this question here. There's a new sort of new age deistic movement where it goes, I don't believe in all the bullshit religions. I believe in a creator because why would humans, that's kind of the ontological argument. The idea of a God.
A few hours ago today, I had a debate with a kid who said that he was not religious. He believes in a God, but he doesn't believe in the Bible at all.
Yeah.
So just throw down all the scriptures and declare deism if you need to.
Yeah.
But his only argument, the only argument he had, fine-tuning, which means the question-begging fallacy. I don't understand X, therefore God.
Yeah. I mean, the fine-tuning, and I mean, I'm scheduled to speak to Lawrence Krauss and a couple of other physicists about that in the next few weeks, and they reckon some of the cosmic constants can actually move a little bit, and nothing would happen. So it's not as
interested in seeing that.
Yeah, it's not as strict as what people make out to be. There are some that are strict, but some are not.
That's what I said earlier today. And this kid, and it's funny that, dude, I've been doing this like obsessively for decades, like 3 decades. I've been doing this job, this argument every day for almost twice as long as this kid's been alive. But he still thinks he knows more than me about it.
Intuition, but that's the ontological argument. That's what the is like. They're saying if everybody keeps pursuing God, maybe the different mythology, doesn't that mean that we there's something instilled in us and we're trying to rediscover that? That's the ontological argument. The idea it's greater that it exists outside in the physical world than it's contained in the human brain, and therefore God's existence must be true because that's the greater of all possibilities. The who is it? Leibniz and Aquinas ontological argument, which is insane to me. Why would an idea must be true because it's inside your head?
There aren't any logically valid arguments. As I told this kid today when he started to bring up the Kalam, for example, I say, okay, every supposedly logical argument for God, all of them, the premises are flawed, and or the conclusion is a non sequitur. On the rare occasion that your premises are not flawed, the conclusion is still a non sequitur. It does not follow from the premises.
Yeah, everything began to exist as a cause.
Flawed too.
Yeah. I mean, what was the syllogism again? Everything that began to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. The universe had a cause.
Yeah.
Not a single cosmologist.
Let's just visit that for a moment. Everything that began to exist has a cause. Why would you say that? You would say that it began to exist because you want to pretend that God is eternal, but you won't allow that the universe is eternal. So you create that arbitrary distinction. Premise number 2, the universe began to exist. No, it didn't.
True. Yeah, it didn't.
The universe didn't have a beginning. Cosmic inflation had a beginning. The universe did not. So both your premises are false. The universe had a beginning, therefore God. Non sequitur. What? How the fuck do you get God out of that?
You get at best, you get another cause. You know, that sort of, that's it doesn't get you anywhere near a God. It could be it could be the God of Spinoza,
Yeah.
which is not a God. I mean, actually, wanted to ask you, probably will end with that, because I actually love the God of Spinoza, and I think Spinoza was quite shrewd, because I think he was convinced that humans will never going to sort of abandon the idea of a God. So he's given them a clawless, toothless God, one with the universe, that doesn't listen to prayers, that doesn't do anything, that doesn't even have consciousness. So
consciousness.
Yeah. So, but it's a God, So therefore, people can just put this case to rest.
It doesn't have magic powers. It's not immortal. It's not anthropomorphic. It meets none of the criteria to be a God. But since you just really gotta believe in a God somehow,
here's one.
here's your bullshit excuse.
Yeah, and became God of the scientists and the philosophers. Einstein. I mean, we're talking about a world some 50 or 60 or 100 years ago. If you're an atheist, you batshit crazy. They will look at you. I mean, the founding fathers of the United States, which is a far cry from the thinkers, the brilliant people who founded the United States, and the far cry from today's leadership, which is insane. Probably a person who's never read a book in his life isn't.
It's poignant that you say this on the day that the big, beautiful budget bill passed. So that's pretty much it for
the bill's been passed.
Pretty much it for the United States that I grew up in.
You're kidding? That's news to me. It's the bill's passed.
Yeah.
According to
the sources that I've seen, it hasn't been signed yet, but all the news sources that I've seen says it's been passed, despite everything opposed to it, because we have stupid ass dipshits like Murkowski from Alaska who voted for it, hoping the House would reject it. She had one chance. She could have saved the country by voting against it. They needed her vote. She could have voted against it, and if they killed her over it, she could have died as a martyr. But no, she had to play the coward. And
how is he getting away with this?
The whole country is full of dipshits.
It's very frustrating. It is very frustrating.
I have so many family members who voted for Trump, who declare themselves to be Christian because they will not read the Bible, and who declare themselves to be supporters of Trump because they only watch Fox News, only, and no one else. So if you only get your propaganda from extreme right-wing news sources and don't compare those stories to anybody else, how would you know? But they don't care what the truth is. They care what makes them feel good, what makes them morally outraged, what appeals to their emotions. So I have people in my family telling me what an evil person I am because I want humans to have rights.
What do you think the consequences? What's the landscape in the United States going to look like over the next?
Well, I kind of knew my whole life that I was never going to collect Social Security. I kind of knew, because I saw this coming from a long way out, that the Social Security network would not exist when it came time for me to collect on it. I'm sorry that projection was correct. I'm sorry that I live in a country that prides itself on these ideals that it does not believe in, and that people who call themselves patriots claim to believe in liberty and justice for all, and clearly don't believe in any of that.
It's so sad. It's very.
Yeah.
This is a sad day for me. It's really sad. I mean,
Well, it's not an entirely sad day for you because you, sir, are in Australia.
yeah, but the U.S. has got the pulse of the world, financially, and as we said before, we're no longer.
We're being ignored now. Trump has fucked our economy so much that Japan is selling their dollars. China is selling their dollars, from what I understand. They're all trading with other people and leaving us out of the loop. So our economy, our once great economy, because you got to be fair, if we didn't elect a man who would destroy all of our lives and our economy and all of our futures, we would have had a black woman president, and we can't have a woman president. So let's just all shoot ourselves in the face to avoid that from happening, huh?
I just don't know what to say. I mean, is there a lot of my friends are leaving the United States, and some people are actually considering moving. I'm not sure what to say. Once, I mean, I'm a big fan of the American Constitution, and the U.S. Constitution and the founding fathers were philosophers, were actually thinkers. People would actually write books and have a great big idea.
Perfect people. We're dealing with all of our critics are only binary thinkers. They can only think in terms of black and white. And if you're not absolutely perfect, then you're completely evil. That's the way that some of these people think. The founders were much better than everybody else in their time, but they were still flawed.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah. They had slaves. Some of the people that actually talked about, they had slaves. But when I'm talking about the intellectual prowess of when I'm comparing Franklin and Trump. I mean, it's like a complete different. Nobody believes that the superpower, the leader of the most important country in the world, is somebody who was talking about COVID-19 at the time and saying, "Well, if you drink Clorox or something, you'll be cured."
Yeah,
or let's hit a tornado with rockets.
Not rockets. He wanted to hit a hurricane with nuclear missiles. It's if I had written this as a fantasy story or a despotic sci-fi 30, 40 years ago, it never would have sold because it was too unbelievable.
Asimov would be very upset.
Yeah. But here we are. We have a man who is president who is the dumbest motherfucker we've ever had in office. This is a man who does not read, does not know any fucking thing except how to screw over people. And he's connected with all of the other billionaire class who became billionaires by not giving a fuck about other people. And Elon Musk is opposing them on the excuse that he wants to create a new political party that actually cares about the people. That fucker doesn't care about people. Look how he runs his own companies. Him and Jeff Bezos both. Let's pay as little as we possibly can and fuck those people. And anytime one of my cyber trucks explodes in somebody's garage and kills a family, we'll blame the family for having the damn thing.
On principle, I had a Tesla Model Y, and I've traded in for a Chinese BYD EV.
My wife wants one of those.
Yeah, it's a beautiful. There's that C line. I've got the C line 7, which is a wonderful car. But I just couldn't drive a Tesla car.
I was always a Chevy guy because my dad was a Chevy guy, and I was frustrated that for decades Chevy was not the progressive company that I wanted them to be, that they should have been.
Mm.
But here in the last 3 or 4 years, I'm impressed. The new C8 Corvette, the ZR1 model,
Yeah.
stunning, fucking stunning. And the best EV, as far as like long range and power and stuff, is a fucking pickup truck, but it's a Chevy,
Wow. Okay.
the Silverado RST.
Oh, it's
And
an
if you want to
EV.
be completely ridiculous, you can also get the GMC Hummer EV, which has 1,000 horsepower and 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. In a
Wow.
truck that weighs 10,000 pounds.
Wow. Wow.
How
That's
do you get that
incredible.
from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds?
Well, the world of EVs is evolving, and they're going to get cheaper and cheaper. But Chinese cars are banned, right? So you can't. Can you get a BYD in the US?
These cars are not banned. It's just Trump had this ridiculous, because Trump doesn't actually know fuck all about finance.
Yeah.
That's why he's had to file for bankruptcy over and over again.
Yeah.
He raised all these tariffs that just fucked our economy completely. Voting for Trump over Kamala has just, if you voted for Trump over Kamala for any reason, you fucked our country forever. That's it.
So we talked about religion and then politics, but I think they're quite interrelated. They've always been in cahoots throughout history.
Yes.
I still remember the evangelists sitting in the Oval Office, putting their hands on Trump, and he's closing his eyes, and being so devout, and so probably thinking about who's he gonna screw next while he's closing his eyes.
Indeed. Yep.
This is sad affairs. Now, just maybe a final thought on the analogy of Jesus and Yahweh. Judaism is black and white. It's very harsh religion. The Israelis and the country of Israel now is actually running crazy in the world as well. Don't follow any of the Mosaic laws. They don't do anything remotely close to what Moses have done to somebody who gathered some sticks on a Shabbat, on a Saturday. Christianity, there's supposed to be no divorce in Christianity, but people always find a way to do what they need to do. So how do you reconcile these two weird characters then, almost Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
Jesus made up his own rules as he went along. So he said, yeah, Moses allowed that you can have divorce, but I say, and how often have you gotten all these, you've got Jesus quotes where very often he says, but I say unto you, where Jesus then completely contradicts what was previously taught. And then he says, you can't, if you divorce someone, you can only divorce them for the reason of sexual infidelity. That's it. But if you divorce someone, you can never get remarried, ever. Because that's realistic. Because once you were married and you're 24 years old and you find out that your 23-year-old wife is cheating on you, well, you just have to be celibate from the rest of your life. Right? Because that's an intelligent answer, right?
It makes no sense whatsoever. So you're right. He was making up the rules as he went, and they were contradicting. Though he said, "I'm not here to change the law." So how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, I'm not here to change the law. Just all of it.
Yeah, even the Shabbat. It's we're not made for it. It's made for us, and. Yeah. Anyway, it's a very, we probably, some Christians will be watching this and they have to think. And look, I'd like to thank you very much, Aron. And guys, the description of this particular video, and whoever is going to be watching this afterwards, the full Wikipedia page of Aron, as well as the YouTube channel. I understand, Aron, this is pretty much your only mean of income at the moment. So
yeah, I
sincerely need
Patreon subscribers, subscribe to my YouTube channel, or please subscribe to my Patreon. I really do need all the help I can get, especially as things are now in our current economy. I don't know how much longer I can persist when the economic fallout hits, when people realize that they're completely strapped. I live off of donations, so I'm not long for this world, if you know what I mean.
But in all fairness, you are giving a lot in return. Yeah, it's not because a lot of people think content creators, you spend hours and hours preparing the contents and the scientific background if you're going to talk about evolution. So there's a lot of work to be you're doing.
The phylogeny videos, which are my favorite ones to do require a whole lot of research, and then just the editing. I've done a couple of videos where it took 3 days. When I say 3 days, I don't mean 3 8-hour days. I mean 3 days of staying up at my keyboard as long as I can stay awake. It takes 3 days to do that kind of. So what is it? I mean, they're 15-hour days, something like that. And then the science videos don't get anywhere near the views as if I just turned the camera on myself and ranted for a minute, because people want drama. They don't want science. If you want science, please become a patron, because that's the only way I can justify doing it.
Well, thank you so much, Aron, one more time, and thank you for everything you've done over the last 2 or 3 decades now. You've been involved in this with. I've got Seth next. I've got Matt Dillahunty next, coming on the channel as well.
You know that I've been doing this for 3 decades or so. Makes me feel like I might get old one day.
No, you're eternal. Your ideas never die. I mean, but that's the thing, with content creation, you want to put something that you're going to be proud of, because one day we're going to be all gone, and you've got yourself a huge library of people. Imagine 50 or 60 years from now, somebody's looking into your content saying, well, wow, he's got a point.
I wish I could say that, but I know that at any point, probably this year, YouTube and Facebook might both delete all my content.
Why? Because of the right.
And my life's work will simply evaporate into the ether.
Ooh. I think there's a way to back it up on a server, and there's a lot of people going to X right now, which is the old Twitter, because even though Elon is a bit nuts, but he does not have the strict policies of YouTube and Facebook. So a lot of people are moving to X and moving their library there.
I don't know what I'm going to do. I would love to have my content remain in perpetuity, but I've seen what has happened to other people. I had a dear friend, DPR Jones, who died 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah,
and his channel was deleted for a rule that didn't exist when he was alive. And so all of his content, his life's work, his legacy, gone.
Sad.
And there's no way that nobody got a warning. There was no way that we could save his material. Just gone.
Yeah. So. It's almost like burning books by the Nazis. It's exactly the same, isn't it?
Yeah. I feel that way. So if anybody can support me on Patreon, please try to. If anybody knows how to save all of my content so that YouTube or Meta won't delete it all and just eradicate my existence, I'd be happy to find out about that too. But I am losing less and less of my trust in humanity by the day.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Really enjoyed the chat. And folks, as I said, look at the description of the video. It's got all Aaron's contact details. Patreon is in there, the YouTube channel. Please go and support. You are getting hell lot of in return. I've learned a lot from your channel. And if you know, price of a coffee, you know, this is how ridiculous it is. I mean, I used to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars to go and watch you know, like somebody close to me speaking. And in today's world, you can be sitting in your pajamas on your couch in a comfortable place in front of your fireplace, and for just the price of a coffee, you can enjoy a full lecture full of details that you know, you'd spend more on gas just getting to that place. So thank you so much for everything, Aaron. And folks, thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you later.
Thank you kindly.